Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We always love getting your suggestions for topics, and this one comes straight from you, our listeners.
Yeah, we heard from a bunch of you asking us to take a closer look at Building Spelling Skills Level 2.pdf by Evan Moorcore, so that's exactly what we're going to do.
Now, at first glance, you might think, okay, it's a spelling workbook for second graders, what's the big deal? But stick with us, because there's actually a lot to unpack here about how we teach spelling effectively at this age, and how this specific resource puts those ideas into practice.
Right, there's a lot more going on than just handing kids a list of words and saying, memorize these.
Hmm.
When you really dig into a resource like this, it's fascinating to see all the thought that goes into it, from picking the right words to designing activities that actually help kids understand how spelling works.
So let's get into it. We're talking spelling lists, dictation sentences, all sorts of activity pages, and even helpful extras like record-keeping forms and tips for spelling strategies. It's a pretty comprehensive approach. Definitely. The goal here isn't just to have kids memorize words parrot fashion, but to actually help them grasp the logic and patterns in English spelling.
Okay, so let's start with the heart of it all. Spelling words. How do they choose which words to include in this thing? It's got to be more than just picking random words out of a hat, right?
Oh, absolutely. The word lists are carefully curated, drawing on a few key principles. A big one is focusing on the top 200 most frequently used words in English.
Which makes sense, right? Those are the words kids are going to come across most often in their reading and writing. So mastering those early on can be a huge advantage.
Exactly. But they don't stop there. They also factor in words that are commonly misspelled by second graders, kind of like those classic spelling bee stumpers. By addressing those common mistakes head on, the resource is really targeting those specific areas where kids tend to trip up.
I like that. It's all about efficiency and really honing in on what's going to make the biggest difference. So we've got high frequency words, common misspellings. What other considerations went into choosing the words for these lists?
Well, they also put a lot of emphasis on words that share common phonetic elements, which is a fancy way of saying they grouped words based on the relationship between sounds and letters. So instead of just memorizing a bunch of random spellings, kids can start to see the patterns and connections. Like, okay, these letters usually make this sound. It becomes more about understanding the system.
Ah, so it's not just rote memorization, but actually teaching them about how the sounds we make connect to the letters we write. Clever.
And lastly, they include words that are formed by adding suffixes, like adding ing or ig.
Mm-hmm.
They've also got compound words like butterfly and contractions like don't. This helps kids see how words can be built and how their forms can change.
Okay, so there's a lot of thought behind these word lists. They're not just random. And the resource even breaks down how these lists are organized, which is kind of cool. There are 30 lists in total, each with 10 words, and you can really see a progression in the types of words and spelling patterns they focus on.
Right. Like the first few lists, list 1 and 2, concentrate on those basic short vowel sounds, which are such an important foundation to build on.
Yeah, you got to nail those short vowels before you can move on to the fancier stuff.
Exactly. Then, as you go through the lists, things get progressively more complex. List 3, for example, dives into the different sounds that the letter A can make, like in hat versus father.
Ah, so they're not just learning one sound per letter, but starting to see how the same letter can represent different sounds depending on the word.
Exactly. And list 4 builds on that foundation of short vowels, but also throws in words with the or sound, like for. You can really see how they're gradually introducing new concepts while still connecting back to what they've already learned.
Gotcha. So there's real logic to how they sequence these lists, and it keeps building from there, right? Like list 5 introduces those long vowel sounds, often with that silent E at the end of the word.
Yeah, that silent V is a big one. They contrast long vowels with short vowels in that list, helping kids see the difference between patterns like bit and bite, which can be tricky at first.
And then you've got list 6 focusing on those different sounds of E, both short as in bed and long as in C.
And this is where it gets really cool. Each list has a specific theme, either a phonetic pattern or a structural element.
Like a little mini lesson built into each list.
Exactly. So list 7, for instance, groups words with long O, long I, long A sounds. The oo sound is in moon, and even introduces the rule of adding the suffix ing without changing the base word, like walk becoming walking.
Oh, that's helpful. It's like they're sneaking in those grammar rules along with the spelling.
Totally. And list 8 dives into long and short A sounds, plus words with the A full sound. It's a very deliberate and organized way to build those spelling skills.
And it just keeps going. List 9 tackles short and long U sounds, and the rule for doubling the final consonant before adding ing, like turning run into running. They also cover long O spellings with the silent E, and the OI sound like in road.
And List 10 brings in both long and short vowel words, plus the rule for dropping the silent E before adding ing, like bake, becoming baking. The progression is super clear.
Yeah, it's not just about exposing them to a bunch of words, it's about explicitly teaching them the rules and patterns that make up English spelling. It's like a code they're learning to crack.
That's a great way to put it. And each list introduces new pieces of that code. Like List 11 focuses on those final consonant digraphs where two letters make one sound, like ch and
Right. And they've also got those blends, like is, where you can still hear both sounds.
exactly. Then List 12 is all about the different sounds the letter Y can make at the end of a word, plus how it sounds at the beginning. And List 13 covers words with double consonants, like apple.
Wow, so they really cover a lot of ground in just those first 13 lists. And it looks like the rest of the list continue to address a ton of common spelling patterns and challenges.
Definitely. We've got lists for short and long O sounds, aw, and all sounds, long A spelled with A-I and I, different pronunciations of oo, ow, and ow sounds, and even those tricky ear, R, and ear sounds like in her, bird, and turn.
That's a mouthful. And it looks like they mix things up, too. It's not just about isolated sounds.
Right. List 19, for example, looks at initial consonant blends like est in stop alongside the oo sound, and then List 20 throws in both long and short vowels, plus words ending in V, where that silent E can affect the vowel sound before it. It gets more complex as they go.
So we're talking initial blends like CR, DR, and TR, the oi sound as in coin, words with other. There's a lot going on.
It's a real spelling workout.
Mm.
And they keep building on those skills. List 23 covers final blends and digraphs like ink, ang, ts, and sh. It even distinguishes between the different sounds teeth can make. And List 24 focuses on long I and long G sounds.
Then we're back to initial blends with TR and ST in list 25. And they even throw in that rule for doubling the final consonant when adding aid, like trip, becoming tripped. They're really packing it all in.
For sure. And List 26 zooms in on different ways to spell that K sound at the end of words, using either K or EK. List 27 focuses on initial blends like PR, TH, and BR. List 28 revisits the oo, ow, and oo sounds, showing all the different ways they can be spelled. And List 29 seems like a bit of a review covering various vowel sounds.
Wow, we made it. All the way to list 30. What's the grand finale?
It ends strong with consonant digraphs like way and T8 and the ear sound, 30 lists. It's a pretty comprehensive journey through the world of second grade spelling patterns.
It's amazing how much they cover. But I love that the resource also emphasizes that teachers can pick and choose which lists are the best fit for their students. They even suggest using the table of contents as a guide. It's not one size fits all.
Right. Not every second grader is at the same level, so that flexibility is really important.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about those word lists, but each of these 30 units is actually way more than just a list of words. What else is packed into these units?
It's like a whole spelling toolkit.
Hmm.
Let's start with those word lists. The book actually recommends making 2 copies for each student, one for school and one to take home.
Makes sense. Got to practice those words everywhere.
And they're not just for solo practice either. Kids can use them for partner work, individual study, and even as a reference when building their own spelling dictionary.
Their own dictionaries. That's cool. We'll have to talk about that more in a bit. So what else do these units include?
Well, after the word list, you've got sentences for dictation. There are 2 sentences for each list, specifically designed to use those spelling words in context.
So it's not just isolated words, but seeing how they actually work in sentences, that's got to be more engaging for kids.
Oh, definitely. And they lay out a really clear process for dictation. First, the teacher reads the whole sentence aloud, then the kids repeat it. Then the teacher breaks it down into smaller phrases, repeats each one clearly, and the kids repeat and write it down. Finally, they read the whole sentence again, and kids check their work by touching each word as they hear it.
I love how interactive that is. It's engaging multiple skills at once, listening, speaking, and writing, all while reinforcing those spelling words.
Right. And to make it even easier, the book has a reproducible testing form with dedicated lines for these dictation sentences.
Super practical. Okay, so we've got word lists, dictation sentences. What else?
Now we get to the heart of it, the activity pages. Each unit has 4 reproducible activity pages, each with a different focus.
Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. Tell me more about these activities.
The first page is usually called Read, Write, and Spell. This is where they really dig into each word, breaking it down into a four-step process. First, they trace the word and say the letters. Then they copy it onto a blank line, spelling it again. Step 3 is where they try to write the word from memory, folding the paper to hide the original. And lastly, they unfold the paper and check their spelling.
That's a great system. It really emphasizes that self-correction piece, teaching them to be independent learners.
Exactly. Catch those mistakes before they become habits.
What about activity page number 2?
That one usually focuses on visual memory. They've got these things called configuration puzzles, where kids have to fill in missing letters within a word's outline. It really makes them pay attention to the shape of the word and the order of the letters.
So they're not just memorizing the spelling, but also building that visual memory of how the word looks.
Exactly. And often they'll also have some extra exercises on these pages, like editing sentences for spelling mistakes, finding rhyming words, adding suffixes, and practicing relevant phonetic elements.
It's like a little bonus round of language skills practice.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay, what about activity page number 3?
Page 3 is all about word meaning. So it's not enough to just spell the word correctly. You got to know what it means too, right?
Makes sense. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of letters.
Right. These activities might involve filling in the blanks in sentences, using those spelling words in their answers to questions, all sorts of things to make sure they're actually understanding the words they're spelling.
Love that. It's about building vocabulary and comprehension right alongside those spelling skills. Okay, last activity page. What's the focus?
This one's called word study, and it really dives into phonetic awareness and word analysis. A lot of times you'll see activities where kids have to sort the spelling words based on specific sounds or patterns.
Like putting all the words with the R sound in one pile and the words with the sound in another pile.
Exactly. It encourages them to really look at the internal structure of words and see those recurring patterns.
So each unit is like a mini spelling boot camp. They're seeing the words, hearing them, writing them, thinking about their meanings, and analyzing their parts.
It's a multifaceted approach that caters to different learning styles and reinforces those words in a bunch of different ways.
Okay, so beyond these activities, are there any overall suggestions for how to practice spelling and what kind of strategies to teach kids?
The book really emphasizes the importance of direct spelling instruction. It doesn't have to be a separate thing, though. It could be a dedicated spelling block, or it could be woven into other language arts activities.
Flexibility is key, right?
Totally. And they highlight 3 key things that kids should be learning. First, how to spell words based on those sound-letter relationships, as well as how to approach those tricky words that don't always follow the rules.
Because let's be real, English spelling can be a bit of a wild ride sometimes.
It totally can. The second thing is to give kids effective strategies to tackle those spelling challenges.
Yeah.
And third, help them understand why correct spelling matters.
Right. It's not just about being a good speller for the sake of it. It's about being able to communicate clearly in writing.
Exactly.
So, what kind of practical tips do they offer for practicing spelling beyond those activity pages?
Well, they really encourage teachers to have kids use their spelling words in their own writing. Not just in practice sentences, but in their stories, reports, anything they're writing.
Makes sense. Got to make it relevant to what they're actually doing.
They also suggest turning kids into word detectives, having them look for the spelling words in other classroom materials like posters or books they're reading. And they can even brainstorm other words that have the same sound or spelling pattern as the words they're learning.
It's all about making those connections.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing lists in isolation. It's about seeing those words as part of a larger system. And of course, creating a word-rich classroom environment where kids are constantly seeing and hearing words is crucial.
You mentioned teaching kids spelling strategies. What kind of techniques does the resource recommend?
Oh, they have a whole toolbox of strategies. One of the most basic is just encouraging kids to say the word correctly, really emphasizing each sound in the right order.
It sounds simple, but it makes a big difference.
Totally. Another strategy is to have them picture the word in their mind, strengthening that visual memory. They also suggest looking for smaller words within a bigger word, like seeing ear inside here.
That's a good one. It breaks it down into manageable chunks.
And using rhyming words can help too. If you know how to spell cat, it might be easier to remember how to spell hat.
Rhyming is always a good trick.
And of course, there are those classic spelling rules, like when to drop a silent E or double a consonant before adding a suffix. They encourage teaching those explicitly.
So it's not just about guessing or relying on memory. There's a method to the madness.
Exactly. And for those tricky homophones like two, and two, they suggest focusing on the meaning of the word to figure out the right spelling.
Ah, yeah, those homophones can be sneaky little devils.
They can. And finally, they remind kids that it's okay to ask for help. They can use spelling charts, their word lists, dictionaries, or just ask a teacher or classmate.
It's all about giving them those tools and strategies to become independent spellers. Now, speaking of dictionaries, you mentioned earlier that kids make their own spelling dictionaries. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's a really neat idea. The book has a reproducible cover sheet that kids can decorate and personalize, and then they glue it onto some lined paper to make their own A to Z dictionary.
So it's their own personal word bank.
Exactly. And they can add words to it all year round.
What kind of words go in these dictionaries?
All sorts of words. Anytime they're writing and they need to ask how to spell a word, that's a prime candidate for the dictionary.
So it's tailored to their own needs.
Exactly. They should also include any special vocabulary they're learning in science or social studies, and words related to holidays or school events. Basically, any word that's important to them and that they might need to use again.
It's like a personalized study guide.
It really is. And a big one is to include any words they consistently misspell. That way, they've got a go-to resource to help them overcome those specific challenges.
I love that. It's all about empowering them to take ownership of their own learning.
Mm.
So they've got all these activities and strategies, but how do they actually track their progress? How do they know if it's working?
Well, assessment is a key part of the resource. They've got a reproducible testing form designed for weekly use.
So it's like a mini spelling test.
Exactly. It has space for the 10 words from that week's list, plus 2 extra special words that the teacher can choose.
Okay, so there's room for customization there.
Definitely. And there are lines for those 2 dictation sentences, so they're tested on using the words in context. Plus, there are a few lines for review words from previous lists.
So it's not just about what they learned that week, but also checking for retention of those earlier words.
Exactly. It keeps those previous lists fresh in their minds.
Yeah.
And for tracking progress over time, they've got both class record forms and individual student record forms.
That's got to be helpful for teachers to see those trends and identify any patterns of errors.
Absolutely. And they even have suggestions for more informal assessment and practice, like doing a quick pre-test at the beginning of the week.
Not for a grade, just to see where they're at.
Exactly. It helps kids see which words they need to focus on, and it helps the teacher tailor their lessons to address any common challenges.
That's so smart. It's like personalized feedback built right in.
And they also encourage practice with a partner. So kids work in pairs, one is the tester and one is the writer.
Like a mini spelling bee with a buddy.
Exactly. It gets them practicing those words out loud, hearing them, and checking their own work.
Collaboration is always a win. So beyond the weekly units, are there any other suggestions for extending the learning?
Definitely. We talked earlier about having kids use those words in their own writing, but they also encourage teachers to have kids look for those words in other texts, like books and magazines.
Turning them into word detectives.
Exactly. And another good one is to have them think of other words that follow the same spelling pattern. It helps them see those connections and generalize what they're learning.
So it's all about making those words come alive, not just keeping them trapped in a workbook.
Right. It's about making spelling a part of their everyday lives.
Now, for teachers who are feeling extra creative, the resource even has a section called Create Your Own Activities, right?
Yep. They have blank forms for teachers to create their own custom spelling lists, maybe focusing on vocabulary from other subjects, holiday words, or specific spelling patterns that need extra practice.
So they can really tailor it to their classroom needs.
Totally. And they even have blank forms for those visual memory puzzles and word sorts, so teachers can get creative and design their own activities.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure spelling book.
I like that. It gives teachers the structure and support, but also the freedom to adapt it to their students.
So, to wrap up our deep dive into this spelling resource, it's clear that it's a lot more than just a bunch of lists. It's a really thoughtful and well-designed approach to building spelling skills in second grade.
It's not just about memorization. It's about understanding patterns, applying strategies, and becoming confident spellers.
And for you, our listeners, even if you're not teaching second grade, I think there's a lot to learn here about how we approach teaching and learning in general.
Absolutely. The ideas behind this resource, the focus on intentionality, multisensory activities, and developing strategies can be applied to all sorts of skills.
It's food for thought, for sure. So as we sign off today, I'd love for you to think about those other basic skills that actually have a lot of thought and complexity behind them. What comes to mind? Maybe reflect on your own experiences learning to spell, or any of these strategies at play in your own education. It's definitely something to ponder. Thanks for joining us today, everyone.